welcome to Celebration Arts. Today is September the 11th, and we're going to talk about what happened in history today, particularly to the arts. But first, let's go over who was born today. O. Henry, D.H. Lawrence, Tom Landry, Brian De Palma, Brad Bird, Virginia Madsen, Chris McDickle, Taraji P. Henson, Mickey Hart, Tommy Shaw, Moby, Harry Connick Jr., Richard Ashcroft, Ludacris, and Ben Lee.
This is the heart of the Teutoburg Forest, a relaxing and peaceful forest near Hanover in northern Germany. In 9 AD, this place was anything but peaceful. It was a battleground where 18,000 Roman soldiers, led by their commander Varus, were ambushed by thousands of German tribesmen, led by the former Roman soldier Arminius. For 3 days, Varus would try to fight his way out of a death trap.
In 9 AD, Rome was a confident imperial power, and it had reason to be. The Emperor Augustus had ruled for 36 years. During this time, he had reformed the army, brought the legions under his sole control, and expanded the borders of the empire. The Romans had never had it so good. He had expanded Rome's boundaries to guard against external attack. He was particularly proud of how the tribes who lived out on the frontier had been colonized and adopted Roman practices. This even seemed to be working well in one of the wildest parts of the empire, Germania, modern-day Germany. New towns were being built. Mainz, Cologne, and Bonn were all Roman garrison towns. The time had now come to Romanize these tribal lands.
In 7 AD, Augustus Caesar appointed Quintilius Varus as governor of Germania. His job was to set up administrative systems in the Rhineland and turn it into a proper Roman province.
But Varus was an administrator, not a battlefield commander. He tried to set up a taxation system in the tribal areas and established good relations with the local leaders. The most prominent of these was Arminius. His lands lay midway between the Rhine and the Elbe. Arminius already seemed Roman in all but name. Arminius was a very able commander. He learned Latin and was made a Roman citizen as a reward for his success on the battlefield. During his years in the army, he had seen the iron grip of Roman government. Varus would have to be stopped. Their route lay through the deep Teutoburg Forest. Arminius' moment had arrived. Varus was about to find out who his true friends really were.
As the Romans entered the forest, they were forced to abandon their normal marching formation. Instead, they formed a long, winding column over 2 miles long. A cavalry detachment led the way. Varus and his entourage traveled midway down the column.
The Romans were now confined to a narrow forest path with a steep hill on one side and a swamp on the other. Suddenly, hundreds of arrows and javelins began to fly from the trees, thudding into the front of the Roman column. Hidden among the trees were the nearly 18,000 German tribesmen. The Romans were in disarray. Now the remainder of the German army swarmed out of the forest from both sides of the track. A volley of spears was followed by close combat with swords. 3 entire legions, almost 18,000 men, were dead. Augustus never recovered from the news.
For presenting yourselves on this battlefield, I give you thanks.
This is our army. To join it, you give homage.
I give homage to Scotland. And if this is your army, why does it go?
We didn't come here to fight for them.
Oh! The English are too many.
Sons of Scotland, I am William Wallace.
William Wallace is 7 feet tall.
Yes, I've heard. Kills men by the hundred. And if he were here, he'd consume the English with fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from his arse. I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight?
Fight against that? No! We will run!
And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
So, after failing 3 times to find this northern route to Asia, Henry Hudson, defying his orders from the Dutch East India Company, turns around, sails across the Atlantic, and finds himself facing the island the local Indians called Mannahatta, Island of Hill. When you learned about Henry Hudson, did anybody tell you what happened to him? Still obsessed with finding that shortcut to Asia, he organizes another voyage to what is now Hudson Bay in Canada. His ship gets stuck in the ice for an entire winter. His crew mutinies. They set him adrift in a small boat and take off. And that was the end of him, but not of what he set in motion. Within a couple of years, Dutch fur traders were working the Hudson Valley. The colony of New Netherland was established by 1621. The village of New Amsterdam, eventually New York City, was founded in 1625. 400 years after Hudson inadvertently changed history, Americans are remembering the voyage he thought was a failure.
I must admit, Mr. Hamilton, I'm a little uncertain as to the purpose of the Treasury Department. No doubt its function will reveal itself to me in good time.
The future prosperity of this nation rests chiefly in trade. Trade depends, among other things, on the willingness of other nations to lend us money.
And how would you propose to establish international credit?
Our first step would be to incur a national debt. The greater the debt, the greater the credit. And to that end, I have recommended to the President that Congress adopt all the debts incurred by the individual states during the war through a national bank. The idea being that if the states owe Congress money, then other nations will feel more inclined to lend it to us.
If the states are indebted to a central authority, it increases the power of the central government.
You have it exactly. The greater the government's responsibility, the greater its authority.
Are home, at least during the day, to upwards of 50,000 workers. I am reminded of a couple of things that happened recently, Dr. Gross. Not long ago, within the last couple of weeks, in fact, There was a pilot who flew. There was another one. We just saw another one. We just saw another one apparently go. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks.
It was really weird being in the city after 9/11 because the city was so quiet. People would get on the subway, no one would speak. People were very polite to each other. You know, just everybody would move in, people would give up their seat, they wouldn't talk. It was just weird. It was almost like they realized how fragile everybody was.
Despite what happened, and the horror and the loss, kind of amazing that Americans could rebound. And, you know, they came back to New York. America came back to New York and helped New York, and spent money in New York, and visited New York.
We were able to do something so quickly, so expeditiously, in terms of getting back to order after the travesty of the World Trade Center when it came tumbling down. To have done that so quickly is amazing.
You have the work in the history of the country in this small little tip of the island, and then 10 years later you go back and it's filled with people. More people have moved there than ever in the history of that neighborhood. Historically didn't have that many families living in it, and now the playgrounds right around the spot where the planes hit are filled with kids. And so there's kind of this sense of like, yeah, you try it, fine. You can fly planes into our buildings, but you know what, we're going to go back and we're going to build a new life for ourselves there.
America rebuilds and looks to the future.
The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry.